Hey, what's going on, everybody? It's Blzane. Now, for those of you keeping up with DC20's development, you're going to know that not that long ago, they released a system that allowed you to create custom weapons, mixing and matching properties, and really making a weapon unique to your character and your style, which is super cool, super fun. It allows for a ton of flavor, a ton of different options, but it left spellcasters a little lonely. So, what if we allowed them to make their own custom weapons, or rather, their own custom spell focuses? Well, if it wasn't abundantly clear, that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, if you are not aware of what a spell focus is, it is typically whatever the spellcaster uses to actually cast their spell. So it might be something like a wand, it might be something like a tome, it might be something like some kind of like magical orb that you hold to kind of cast your spells through, right? So you'll see this especially for like clerics, right? They'll have like their holy symbol on their shield or things along those lines, right? Now, when it comes to these, typically you're just casting spells through them, and that's it. They don't do anything special. They're more of just like a symbolic piece. It also makes sure that you're actually taking up a hand for something, and you're not just like, force lightning doing everything out of your hands, which could be inherently powerful, because then you could hold other things, a whole issue. Now, with this, it can get a little boring, because for a martial, you have swords, axes, daggers, all these really cool things to choose between and mix and match. But for spellcasters, you don't have that until now. Now, weapons, when it comes to their weapon properties and weapon styles, are two separate things. So you have things like this list here with weapon styles, where you're going to have things like your axe style, your bow style, your chain style, which will all give different things. But you also have weapon properties, which I'll throw up now, and these go basically on top of the style. When it comes to these spell focuses, they only have the properties. There's not really styles to them. Now, inherently, I think this is for the better, especially because weapons should still be pretty special in its customization, seeing as we've talked about before and has been talked about many a times, martials tend to lack the kind of cool creativeness that a lot of spell users have, so whenever they get these styles, it's kind of cool that it stays a thing that is just for them. However, because your spell focuses only have properties, doesn't mean that they give any less powerful effects or are still any less beneficial to you as a spellcaster. One other thing I want to mention before we get into some of these properties is I am not on the dev team, obviously, so they might be coming out with styles. It might be something they do eventually, but as of right now, it doesn't exist within the focus properties and things like that. But again, I've already given you my reasoning. I think it's better this way. I think let martials have their cool thing. Now, there's a few different options that are going to be available when it comes to these focus properties, and a lot of them add some really cool effects. Now, I will mention there is only a single negative effect, because if you're used to DC20 systems at all, whether it's Ancestry or the weapon properties or things like that, there's usually a downside that you can add to your character or add to that weapon, and then it gives you more points to use. For example, on weapons, you can add the two-handed property, which is inherently a nerf, and then allow it to have more additional good properties. Same thing when it comes to these focuses, you can actually add the two-handed option, which is really cool. So then if you want to be a mage with like a big two-handed staff, you can do that. And by doing that, because you're locking up both your hands, the spell focus is going to have more options and more good attached to it. Now, some of these properties I think are super, super cool and have their own unique uses, and some of them are pretty standard what you'd imagine. So running through them, you have things like Channeling, which is going to give you a +1 to your actual spell checks. You have Vicious, which is going to give you a +1 bonus to actually hit. You have Protective, which makes your AD, active defense if you're not aware, increased by 1. Warded, which gives you magic damage resistance, very nice. Long Range, which is going to give any spell that is greater than touch +5. So if it is a touch spell, you do not get to add 5 to it, otherwise that would be insane. We have Reach, which allows you to cast a spell with a range of touch and change it to 2 spaces. So you could inherently use both of those, but again, it'd have to be a two-handed thing, and it's all that. But could be a very cool combination. You've Muffled, which is when we're getting into some of the cooler ones, which lets it where when you do verbal components for your spells, it can only be heard within 5 spaces of you. So if you're trying to be a little bit of a spell sniper, that one could be really cool, because if you're far enough away, they're not going to hear you casting the spell. You also have Reactive, which this is probably my favorite one, where whenever you are the challenger in a spell duel, and a spell duel is basically if an enemy casts a spell, you can cast one to challenge it. And whenever you do this, you get advantage on your spell check in order to stop the spell. And you can only benefit from this property once per spell duel. but super sick, super fun. If you're trying to play a bit of a like counter mage style, super effective for that. And then finally, this is the only 2-pointer, and that's going to be powerful, which is you deal +1 damage with spell attacks, which obviously that is 2 points because that is insane. Having +1 damage in a system where it basically goes by like increments of 1 damage is pretty crazy. Now, if through all that you're still a little unsure kind of what you should be imagining or what you're picturing in your head, it gives some good examples here that I can provide. So for some one-handed options, it might be something like an orb that has channeling. It might be something like just a rod that you keep in your hand. Or maybe something like a ritual bell, which has reactive, allowing you to be a little more, reactive to things. And then some two-handed options. The obvious mage staff is an easy one. Something like a grimoire could be really, really cool. You just have this like ginormous book that you cast your spells through. Things of that nature. It even mentions a magical instrument, which I think could be super fun in terms of flavor. Now, through using these spell focuses, there is something to mention that is kind of a downside, not really, but it is inherently like a weapon for spellcasters. What do I mean by that? Well, for one, if you lack training with that spell focus or that type of spell focus or whatever you want to call it, you're not going to gain the benefits of it. So what that means is you can't walk around picking up spell focuses and just all of a sudden treating it as one. You must actually have training with said spell focus, which I think is good. I think you shouldn't be allowed to just mix match and pick up whatever. Spell focuses should be special to that person. And on top of that, one thing to note, because these are just like the weapons in DC20, flavor them how you want. And this is more of just a, hey, me to you, trying to help you out. Make it whatever you want. Like I just mentioned in the example section, you can make your spell focus inherently anything as long as your DM is okay with it. Having a huge magical tuba that you run around casting spells with is hilarious. Now, obviously, you let the DM, know about it and try to work your way in. Don't just slam a magical tuba in their face and hope that they go with it, but something to think about. Now, the last thing I want to mention with it being treated like a weapon is you do need to acknowledge rules like stowing, sheathing, and unsheathing your magical focus or your spell focus in the same way that a martial user would. You don't get out of it just because you're a spellcaster. You do have to follow those same rules using your minor action and things like that. So there you have it, another banger update coming to DC20. I'm super excited. I think spell focuses are really, really cool and just give you one more way to customize your character in DC20, which is a huge focus of it, and I think they have done excellent. But hey, if you're interested in DC20, down in the description there's a link that can get you straight to where you can get the PDF. It also helps me out because I get a small piece of that, so as a content creator, I really appreciate it. And let me know down in the comments what you think. If you think this is cool, if you think maybe it's too much, whatever you have. But nonetheless, I hope y'all have a good one. Peace out.